Okay, testing. 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah, I think we're good. Let me check here with the. I should. One of these days, I'm gonna have this streamlined. Okay, so there's that. Oh, hello, Nadia. Cool. Well, welcome to the Black Ponderer. My name is Neil Trotter. I'm the host. This is a YouTube channel where we talk about philosophy. Specifically, we read philosophical texts, then we talk about them. And, we also do these live streams. My usual videos are we just talk about. I read you a text that has philosophy in it, and I give my supplementary commentary, and then we continue the discussion on the YouTube comment section. But this time we do live streams, and live streams are more just loosey-goosey conversational style about just general topics. But I've been sitting in on a college course that I got a buddy who's a professor at a college, and they have let me just sit in, and I'm just taking readings from that class, and we're just talking about them. So that'll be fun. And so we're gonna do some close reading about this text that I found interesting from the class, and then of course we got to continue the conversation. Feel free to jump in. This is the live streams are more like hangouts. We're hanging out. We're just talking. We're shooting the shit together. Think of it like we're at a nightclub or something, or a lounge, and we're sitting in the back, just chilling. So that's what it's like. So feel free to just talk about whatever. The topic of today reminds me of a book on my reading list, A Paradise Built in Hell: The Extraordinary Communities That Arise, a Disaster by Rebecca Solnit. Okay, I think I heard of that one. The book deals with the aftermath of disaster, challenging the traditional narrative of chaos and mass panic, with evidence that people typically respond to disaster with solidarity and mutual aid. That's what the news, they don't want you to hear about that. But we members of Food Not Bombs know. We know what's up. Okay. Your bro Nick randomly came up on my Instagram algorithm. It's funny. There's a small world after all. And I was like, this person looks so much like Neil. So I checked him out. And saw that you followed him. So it was confirmed. Yeah, I have a twin brother. I probably already mentioned that. I wonder if it's possible to bring up, before we get started, I got a really good image of us together. Let's see. Where's my internet? I'm confused. Okay. But we'll get started in just a few moments here. What's going on? And then, would you ever do a PhD? No, because unless like I have no more financial responsibility, then I would do it. But you're not getting really. It's just not financially feasible, right? Particularly here in America. I know it's like you actually get paid to do a PhD. It's a job, but it's a bad job. It's not a good job. Like, it doesn't pay much money. I don't see that happening, particularly because like I could basically do independent study, so it's more just what is it? It's like it's just a title, really. It's not really it used to mean something, but it doesn't mean as much anymore. And to be a college professor, that's becoming a lot harder to do these days, to get a job in in the university. I'm just trying to find Where would it be? Maybe I should just give up. I think that might be a good idea. Oh, here we go. I found it. That's funny. That's hilarious. What do I do? You won't care. Do I do this? Okay. Then I do this. There we are. This is an anime. This is the dealer's hall of the anime convention or the artist alley that we host. We run a little small business where we host the anime convention. Yes. And I usually have this little get up because I'm like an MC at the event. And that's my twin brother. So there you go. It's a little side info. All right, put that away. Go back to my camera. All right. I can see you being a professor. Yeah, it's hard to be a professor nowadays. Maybe it's easier in other countries, but in the United States of America, shit, it's just not enough. There's too many people applying, not enough spaces. And then the road to become a professor with a financially, that could financially support you. You got to do this whole adjunct thing, which is like really, it's rough. Like you don't get paid that much. And then even once you get tenured, you don't immediately become a tenured. You get on tenure track. So you're still not getting paid. You got to spend like multiple years doing that. It's almost like becoming a doctor, where you have to do a residency, then you got to do medical school. Like you do all this schooling first before you're actually able to make money. So yeah, I'm not really interested in that life unless I like won the lottery or something. That would be the only reason. But I'm glad you're here on YouTube teaching us for free. Yeah, and also teaching myself. That's cool. Anyway, let me bring up the description. Broska. And my doggy. So today we're going to talk about, he's going to do a close reading on an excerpt of The Queer Art of Failure Introduction. So The Queer Art of Failure is a book, and we're just focusing on the introduction, the chapter. It's called Low Theory. It's by Jack Halberstam. And I guess I put essay discourse because, we're just talking about the introduction. And you know how we do here in the Black Ponderer, in case maybe you don't know. We just read little excerpts. So I just highlight things I find interesting, and we just talk about it. So I put in the description, the meaning of failure could be a way of becoming and unbecoming. And this dialectical contradiction proposes a different relation to knowledge. Considering the current state of politics, are we in a moment of unbecoming that could offer us a new avenue of constructive knowledge? So we'll get into that, because the author brings up this idea of, failing is good. Failure is kind of a way we get out of this mess. And success might be our downfall. A part of it is like, yeah, it's a different way of thinking about it. But a lot of it is, part of it I think is also just trying to be cool. It's like, yeah, have you ever thought of failure as success and success as failure? It's gimmicky, but it's, I think it opens kind of a new thought process. But there is kind of like a gimmickiness to it. But we'll keep going. Falling outside of patriarchal norms can provide the opportunity to recreate some of the meaning of gender. Can gender then mean a creation of how one defines their being? So, yeah, that is called the queer art of failure. So we're talking about queerness. This is queer theory in the house. What it do? That's the college course I'm sitting in on. It's as a queer theory course. Now, what else did I put? Has the white picket fence / 2.5 kids American dream fantasy truly being questioned now? Isn't there still a strong societal yearning to continue that pursuit? All this and more as we do a close reading of the live stream. Okay, so that's that. What's the name of the professor? Yeah, I think they would appreciate a shout out because they got some texts that you might want to look up. Their name is Beck Hendrickson. I'll spell it in the chat. Teaches at Rhodes College in Memphis, here in Memphis, Tennessee. I think that's it. Let me just check, verify, because I think they got some works out. Yeah, no, I misspelled that. Yeah. And I'm sure they wouldn't mind you checking out their text that they wrote. I think that'll be cool. But this is just something from another academic. Okay, let's go over some quotes that I highlighted here. All right. So in this text, it's the one of the arguments is the author quotes a lot of, like, I guess it's kind of lowbrow entertainment. Like they quote a lot of SpongeBob SquarePants. I've actually not really seen that show much, to be honest with you. And they quote a lot of like Madagascar, that cartoon, and like what else? All types. Oh, Little Miss Sunshine, which that was a critically acclaimed film. I haven't seen it, but a lot of my friends love it. There's another one. I thought that was that movie with Jim Carrey, but that was another one. That's another one. The one Stephen Carell, I think, is the one with Little Miss Sunshine. But yeah, right now he's quoting SpongeBob, and then it's a cartoon where was it the Mr. Krabs? That's the boss. I've seen a little bit of SpongeBob. Says that talking about the world outside, the dry world, not the ocean. They're like, oh, it's so bad, they'll catch you with a fish net. And then they'll like eat you alive. And then SpongeBob is like, I can't believe what's worse than that. And then Mr. Krabs is like, oh, you might be in a gift shop, right? And so like what he's saying is like capitalism is like really bad. And I highlighted, so like, what is the alternative? In other words, like the alternative is a gift shop or getting eaten alive. In other words, to cynical resignation on the one hand and naive optimism on the other. What is the alternative? So it's apathy or it's selling out. These two, and as you look at the world, it took me a while to really think about that. What do you mean by that analogy? But it's, we're in this world, right, that's kind of dominated by capitalism. And so, like, literally, like, the phrase is, oh, this world will eat you alive. It'll destroy you. And so as a result, people will either, like, become apathetic to that, be like, yeah, life sucks. And they'll just allow that to happen. Or they'll get along with the program and they'll sell out. They'll be like, well, fuck that. I'm going to be the one eating. I'm going to eat the other people, They get with the selling out program. So we have these two options. And then you kind of think about, well, this is success and failure in our society. It's either you let the capitalism just destroy you. You just don't succeed, and so you're considered a failure, or you're considered a success. You get into that gift shop. You get a, a 9-to-5 job. You get that pension plan. You get that white picket fence, and you generate that capital for those corporations, right? So that's success, and so that's success in our world, right? And the author is saying like, well, you know what? Maybe success in this world isn't as good as it's made out to be. Maybe we should be failing in this system. So I highlighted, loses the idealism of hope in order to gain wisdom and a new spongy relation to life, culture, knowledge, and pleasure, right? So, yeah, the idealism of hope. Like, hope is what we, we rely on, like, it'll get better. It's like, well, the author is saying like, well, maybe we just have to fail in this system to like actually think of other ways that could get us out of this mess. That is, late stage capitalism, patriarchal heteronormativity, right? A basic desire to live life otherwise, right? And then I highlighted, search for different ways of being in the world and being in relation to one another than those already prescribed for the liberal and consumer subject, right? That's what we're talking about. Like, how about we find other ways of relating to each other other than like, generating capital for corporations? Like, are there other options we could do to like relate to each other and interact with the world and ourselves, right? But if you do that, you're considered a failure, right? If you don't get the job and you don't work for a company, not only are you, first of all, like the whole notion of your failure, but also like you do need money to survive, right? You do need money to like pay the bills, pay the living expenses. So in that way, you're also failing, right? But is there a way to fail where we can, take care of ourselves and get out of this system? That's the question, all right? Makes its peace with the possibility that alternatives dwell in the murky waters of a counterintuitive, often impossibly dark and negative realm of critique and refusal, embracing the unknown and the alternative. Okay, so you can see maybe you're starting to go toward like queerness, because that's in a way what queerness is this rejection of what's considered normal, in the sense like the white picket fence, even American fantasy, right? Of like husband, wife, 2.5 kids, the dog, the cat, the goldfish in the bowl, in the fish bowl, right? The daddy is the breadwinner, the mommy is the homemaker. We still have these notions today, which is you think like we're beyond that, but as we were seeing in society today, particularly politics, there's this enormous force trying to drive us back to that era of like 1950s, patriarchy. Queerness is a rejection flat out of that, right? And that's how it's considered a failure, right? But that's why the author is suggesting, like, well, in this way, failure is a good thing. And like, when you look at failure, it's like, who are the hell are these judges who are saying that you failed, right? I mean, they're the jackasses who are in power, right? So should we even be like, if they consider us failure, who gives a shit, right? In our ways, we succeed. So, that's cool. That's cool. A more chaotic realm of knowing and unknowing, right? Think about ways of being and knowing that stand outside of conventional understandings of success. Success in a heteronormative, capitalist society equates too easily to specific forms of reproductive maturity combined with wealth accumulation. And that was that American dream we were talking about. And I say American dream, I know like there's people in the chat from Canada and all parts of the world, but you know, the westernization that America is like the model and is pushing throughout the world, right? That many countries are adopting, or maybe some countries are rejecting, but they're still like their rejection is centered on that American model, where it's like, well, let's not even center that, right? Let's just flat out reject it, and you know, let's not like build our world around these notions, you know, our realities. But these measures of success have come under serious pressure recently, right? The American dream, the success of the American dream has come under serious pressure recently. Well, I mean, it's true, like, a lot of people are not achieving the American dream. that's mostly Americans are not the American dream, but you know. And then there's the whole idea, like, well, did this thing actually exist? Well, it existed for a very small segment of the public, you know, white men, right, of a certain age and a certain like class. But everybody else, it wasn't really a thing, right? Unless, you know, there's rare exceptions, of course. But I would argue, though, like, despite all that, despite the fact that the American dream wasn't really actually a thing that that happened for most people throughout American history, the success or the idea of it is still very strong, and people today are still chasing that dream. And I think, like, if you see politics today, it's kind of this clinging to that dream, and I think we have to acknowledge that, right? We got to say, like, you know, because there's this notion of like, well, you know, as we move forward in the future, people are going to wise up and they're going to understand that these ideals are just bullshit, right? But that's actually not what's happening, right? That what's happening is people are still buying into this, and they're trying their best to like assume these roles, and then we have a lot of you know, powers from up top, like politicians that are enforcing these dreams into us, right? You know, like the banning of books and things like that kind of stuff, where it's like, well, don't, you know, or the rejection of like social programs that like, you know, make efforts to include diversity and things like that, or like different ways of thinking that are outside like the heteronormative. All right, so that idea of success still exists very much today, right? And I think maybe that's where the author is a bit off, but we'll continue here. Failing is something queers do and have always done exceptionally well. For queers, failure can be a style. So that's what, you know, the author's saying, and it's true. And that's and you know what's interesting about it is like it's not something that, you know, whether they're somebody who you know, who is queer or of the LGBTQ plus you know, spectrum, right? Which is, you know, this massive you know, set of characteristics for a human being, right? You know, it's not necessarily like an intentional, and it's just like, you know, it's just living life, like living life as one does, right? Even when one tries to like avoid problems or like avoid like opposition, you know, just because they are who they are, they're failing because they're failing in this heteronormative system, right? And so in which it's often like that's where like things like when people say like, well, life is politics, right? It was Aristotle famously said, the famous philosopher Aristotle said, the human being is a political animal, right? It's a political animal. Even like the very act of living is like political, right? It's just, we are inherently political just by living. So a lot of people will say like, well, I'm not trying to get into politics. And some people would even say like, my life is not like a politic, right? I'm just trying to live life. But unfortunately, when you have forces that are in society that are using, your lack of existence as like a way for them to get power, right? Like, by you not, the erasure of you as an existing being is what fuels their power, right? That makes your life political, right? Just by that notion alone. And that's something to consider, right? Let's see. Use these negative effects to poke holes in the toxic positivity of contemporary life, right? Toxic positivity, right? As we all know, like, we like to pretend, it's kind of like that Stepford wife situation, where everything's all hunky dory and like, but there's, shit going on behind the scenes. That's like life today. It's like the internet. It's like anything you can think of, right? The internet is an example. Like, the internet is a great tool that uses to connect everybody together and makes the world a smaller place, and people are socializing and getting all this knowledge. But then there's this other part about the internet that's very toxic, as we all know, about the social media, the parasocial aspect that makes people feel very lonely, the push of hustle culture, the fixation on like likes and subscribes. People don't really know anybody anymore. People just know personas and avatars like usernames, but nobody is authentic, that kind of thing. So that's contemporary life today, right? But rejecting a lot of that, failing. I mean, a good example is this YouTube channel, where it's like, in a sense, it's kind of failing because I don't really do a lot of things the contemporary. I don't do things that are very helpful for the algorithm to push, which people tell me all the time. It's like, dude, you need to like do things that are going to help the algorithm. But it's like, well, I don't want to succeed like that. Like, I don't want that kind of success. So I'm failing in like my views, but I don't, that's something that type of success, I'm not interested in. So it's the same thing. Or it's kind of similar, right? And then the author even says, a mass delusion. American exceptionalism is a mass delusion, right? Which I think the cat's out of the bag by now, except for like if you're a MAGA person or something. But if you're not, then you pretty much understand, like, yeah, like the idea of America as this great country has just completely been obliterated, right? It's like not a thing anymore. Positive thinking is offered up in the U.S. as a cure for cancer, a path to untold riches, and a surefire way to engineer your own success. Indeed, believing that success depends upon one's attitude is far preferable to Americans than recognizing that their success is the outcome of the tilted scales of race, class, and gender. Right. Again, that's like this typical lie that's pushed. It's like, you're rich because you tried hard, and people who are poor haven't tried hard as you. And it's like, it's just bullshit. It's just nonsense, right? Like, I'll say it time and time again, and it's pretty obvious. Many of you preach it to the choir, right? Wealth is is acquired mostly through inheritance, right? Intergenerational wealth. Furthermore, that inheritance is acquired through extreme exploitation. And, we're talking about the enslavement of Africans from, African peoples. If you really trace, if you rather do the hard work, I mean, it is Black History Month, right? Today, right? If you really want to do the work of tracing, like, where the hell did this money come from? Where's your family? You might think like, oh, it's this business that started, but then you keep going back and back in history, you realize, oh shit, like this money was got gathered in shady ways by some ancestors I had, or other ways like the slaughtering of indigenous people, and I mean, this is how wealth was generated in America and other parts of the world as well, right? And it's still difficult for people to wrap their minds around that, mainly because we have this erasure campaign of people in power who are trying to like get that out of our minds so we don't think about it so they can stay in power, right? I would further argue like, homophobia and transphobia and like all this anti-queer sentiment is that too. It's like it's poking a hole in this heteronormative power structure. And it's like, it doesn't really have to be this way. You don't have to, conform to this structure, which aids in all this generation of capital, right? That's like, oh no, we don't want to go there. We don't want to talk about that. While capitalism produces some people's success through other people's failures, the ideology of positive thinking insists that success depends only upon working hard and failure is always of your own doing. Right. The power of positive thinking hides the exploitative nature of capitalism, right? Most things we consume are based on exploitation of the land or of other human beings, right? Because that's like a capitalist, because we our economics is capitalist, and capitalism is like an exploitative model. So right, so that's just how capitalism operates. It operates through exploitation. So yeah. Now and that's how it is today. Before the Industrial Revolution, right, when our version of capitalism existed, there still was like this colonialism, right, or which was, if you use these terms, if we're sticking to the capitalist social economic framework, we use the term imperialist to mean like countries that have a lot of power go into other countries and like exploit their resources, whether it's humans, the indigenous people, or their land, right? So, there's that too. So, there's that. And then I also put, power of positive thinking, stuff like, you gotta be careful with things like I'm manifesting this to be real, or like the law of attraction. I don't really, I'm not gonna bust your bubble if you believe in that. I don't really believe in that. But I do think that kind of thinking, like law of attraction, manifests. It kind of shades the reality of where wealth generation and success actually comes from. You might think like it's kind of the whole idea, like, oh, I got to try hard. I got to like be mentally channeling, and the people who aren't successful are not like manifesting enough, right? Whereas like really what's happening is you're getting wealth because you're in the proper social economic conditions, right? You're this, you're that, and you have the hookups and the connections and the timing with your the luck that you have is really like what's bringing this about, right? So it's important to think about that. How deeply Americans want to believe that health is a matter of attitude rather than environmental losses. Oh, yeah, loses the idealism of. Oh, I'm my bad. Let me repeat that. I'm on the wrong page. How deeply Americans want to believe that health is a matter of attitude rather than environmental degradation, and that wealth is a matter of visualizing success rather than having the cards stacked in your favor, right? All right, that's really what's going on here. Right? Politics offers a better explanatory framework than personal disposition, right? And so I always push back when people are like, I'm not here to talk about politics. Like, I'm not a political person. And it's like, all right, well then you're just not gonna ever, you're never gonna be part of the solution to the problem that the world faces today. And that's fine. Like, you know, a lot of people are checking out, but the problem is you're checking out, and then there's all, you know, the people who are causing all the problems, they're just having their way. So it's like, you're not helping, right? So we have to do the hard work of like facing these issues, and, you know, forcing ourselves to really like, okay, this is a political issue, right? The negative thinker can use the experience of failure to confront the gross inequalities of everyday life in the United States. The power of negative thinking, right? For example, one of the, in the laws here, so I live in Tennessee, which is in the state of Tennessee here in the United States of America, which is one of the most aggressive banning of books of all the states, right? And in that, the law, the legislative wording, it says like, oh, we don't, you know, books or texts that make children feel uncomfortable should be not included in school. That's the framing. I'm paraphrasing, but it definitely uses the word like uncomfortable or like guilty. It makes them feel guilty. It is like, and so, yeah, like negative thinking can use the experience of failure to confront gross inequalities of everyday life. Sometimes we gotta feel uncomfortable to get to the root of the problem and get into a position to solve it, right? But of course, like, you know, the people who write these laws, they don't, you know, it's like they don't give a shit about what children feel or don't feel. They just like, oh, this is threatening our authority, so we need to ban these books, and we'll just make some shit up so the masses will believe in it. Right? That's what's going on there. From the perspective of feminism, failure has often been a better bet than success. Where feminine success is always measured by male standards, and gender failure often means being relieved of the pressure to measure up to patriarchal ideals, not succeeding at womanhood can offer unexpected pleasures. And I wrote, failure can signify a rejection of a failed system. Right, so what does it mean? We go back to this all the time. Like, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? Right? I would argue we don't really know these things. We have answers, but they're not like, they're based off of falsehoods, right? Like, you know, the idea that you know, men are naturally like, you know, aggressive, dominant, you know, women are submissive, you know, mostly kind and compassionate, right? Whereas, you know, we rely on, and then I could go on and on and on, nurturing for women. And so if a woman is not these things, if a woman happens to be like very aggressive or like, you know, not like nurturing, if the woman has like not that much nurturing disposition, then they're a failure, right? But, you know, feminism kind of, you know, not all feminism, but many aspects of feminism has looked at these descriptions and be like, well, what are these descriptions based off of? Like, where are they coming from? Right? And they look at people who, you know, who are failing at these descriptions, and you know, it's like, well, you're not a failure. Maybe you're actually showing like holes in our logic. You know, that's what's happening here, right? Like you're exposing truths about like about how we should really think about like gender and like identity and like human beings, right? And then I highlighted fall outside of patriarchal norms can recreate some of the meaning of their genders. Yeah, so then that was the question I asked at the beginning. Can gender mean the defining of one's being? Is that what gender means? What does gender mean? Right? Is a good question. And maybe gender just means like, oh, like this is how I define myself. It's your definition of who you are, right? That's what gender is. I don't know. And then Nadia, I have been helping out in the encampment near my house, and I've been thinking that if you don't fit the narrow vision of what a human should be under capitalism, is a good indicator of your character. Why you having it? You mean like a houseless, homeless encampment? And then you're saying, woman, yeah, no. Today, a homeless account, yeah. Earlier today, I went out and gave some homeless houseless people food and gave them some, harm reduction supplies and contraceptives, because contraceptives are great, condoms and condoms are great to have because STDs and STIs are a big thing, and people need to be safe. And then birth control, because also like abortion is illegal here in Tennessee, so that's the other good reason to give them out. And we also give out hygienic products. But that was fun because we were having deep conversations with the people on the street, living on the street, and always a blast. They're cool peeps. Some of them are my buddies. Made some new friends. But yeah, they have some great character, right? Those are some nice people, for sure. Okay, let's see what's going on here. My mom also was homeless for a couple of years. Okay, as she didn't fit in the way you have to be under capitalism, she couldn't work 9 to 5. Yeah, lots of people can't do that type of shit. But she was the nicest person. Oh, great. Yeah, not everybody can, do that 9 to 5 shit. And then so the argument is like, well, if you can't do it, then you're a failure. Like there's something wrong with you, and you need to get with the program, figure it out. But it's like, no, maybe that's a stupid ass system to subject a human being to. Maybe not all human beings are meant to do that shit, and to think that all human beings should be is like an idiotic idea. Like, maybe we need to think like that for a minute. But that's not going to serve the interests of corporations. So if we start throwing that out there, but that's what the text is saying. Like, let's think about failure, and like failure in terms of failing in this system is actually a form of success. Right? So these people are seen as failures, right? Even though they're nice people, they're just like not. Yeah, like I'll say it till I'll die on this hill. It's just they're not generating capital for corporations, so that's why like they're considered failures. Like it's pretty straightforward actually, but yeah. And then I highlighted. Where are we? Okay. Contradictions of a society obsessed with meaningless competition. By implication, it also reveals the precarious models of success by which American families live and die. So the author's talking about our obsession with competition, meaningless competition, like the Olympics or something or sports generally. Sports are fine, but sometimes it does, you kind of think about it a little bit. It is weird. Like that's how we define success. It's okay to, it's fine to like sports, but then it just gets kind of like, what is it? Not obsessive, but like, you start getting, what was it when I guess it is obsessive, right? When you start getting like really obsessed with a sport, particularly like, let's take for example baseball. Right, baseball's fun. I mean, it can be fun, right? It is fun, but you look at these people like heroes, like, whoa, it's so cool. Why? Because they're able to hit a ball with a bat and run around in a circle on these diamonds on the, like, it's kind of silly, right? I mean, it's fine, but are these people like heroes? Same thing with the Olympics. Like, the Olympics are fun, right? But we sometimes we fixate on this stuff like, oh, this is a sign of greatness. They're great people. It's like, well, really, they just jumped over a hurdle, which is cool. I'm not, but it's like that's what they're doing now. I'm not degrading. Like, I know they practice for 4 years doing a lot of that stuff, like doing the flips and flipping around and the pole, the rings that are hanging and then flipping around and shit, and that's cool. But I don't know. Sometimes we just take it too far. And then we model like life as like, okay, this is what everything should be like. Everything should be like a competition where you have these really kind of abstract, like arbitrary rules that you have to abide by, and then you do it, and then you're a success. It is like, no, that's kind of weird actually when you really think about it. Oh, hello, Toaz. If sports is a personality trait, there may have been mistakes, right? Right. You look at any sport, like football. It's like, you're pushing the ball moving the ball from one position to the next, and then it's really silly actually when you think about it, and it's not like. It's different. Like when you're a little kid and you play sports, it's fine because you're just having a good time. You're having fun. Of course, you make rules so it could be challenging and it's fun. But then it gets to this other level where it becomes like fanatical. I think that's the word I wanted to use, fanatical, where it's like, it's kind of psychotic in a way, right? Like we're fixating over like, wow, he threw that ball 60 feet. And it's like, so? You know how hard that is? Sure, it's hard, but it's just a ball being thrown. Like, it's not that big of that's cool. That's cool, but what about all this other shit that you don't care about, right? Or just, you can go on and on and on about, like, what we consider great acts of greatness when really they're just so arbitrary. And you have to like take a step back and think like, why is it that we obsess over these very specific narrow kinds of like mission objectives, right? Like, what is this all about? It could get weird. Let's see. Terms like serious and rigorous tend to be code words in academia, as well as other contexts, for disciplinary correctness. They signal a form of training and learning that confirms what is already known according to approved methods of knowing, but they do not allow for visionary insight or flights of fancy. So now the author's bringing this whole note, like what we're talking about like, soccer, for instance. That's another one. Just use that, or football. Most of the world calls it football. We in America call it soccer, right? And you gotta kick, you gotta move the ball to the other side into the goal, and you're using your feet. And it's like you have to use your feet. You can't use your hands. So like, okay, that makes it hard, but how good it is. It's similar to like how we structure school and education. Like, okay, we're gonna do these standardized tests, and if you score really high on these standardized tests, then you're considered very incredibly intelligent and smart. But it's like, yeah, but it's only this. It's a very narrow understand like intelligence, right? It literally is like disciplinary correctness. Like ultimately, school. Like if you excel really high in school, that just means you're extremely good at following orders, right? Right. That's what, I mean, ultimately, school is designed for you to like work for a corporation. Like that's the whole like that's what school is based off of. You're developing to be a laborer. You're developing to create to generate capital for a corporation. Right? Again, we go back to that. All right. But there's so many other versions of intelligence that are just dismissed flat out, which is strange, right? If you really think about it. So that's why authors say, like, yeah, they might fail in a standardized test, but like maybe that's just showing you, like, well, perhaps like that standardized testing is not a real measure of human intelligence, right? Or maybe we're thinking about intelligence in this extremely narrow, point of view, right? Just noticing my shirt. My wife got me this shirt. I am Black History. That's my doggy right there. He's waiting for dinner, but it's still an hour before he gotta eat. He always wants it too early. Okay, let's see here. We can keep going for a little while. Okay, I highlight the project of generating new forms of knowing, alternative ways to understand a problem. Knowledge of canons identifies scholars with an aptitude of maintaining and conforming to the dictates of discipline. Unregulated territories of failure, loss, and unbecoming must make a long detour around disciplines in ordinary ways of thinking. Universities, and by implication high schools, squash rather than promote quirky and original thinking or original thought. And then I put evaluating the best at conforming to status quo rather than imaginative problem solving, which is what we need today. Right? How are we going to solve like climate change or social injustice or social inequity or like the huge problems that are facing the world today, hunger, homelessness? How are we going to solve the homelessness crisis, right? Which is a huge crisis, right? The healthcare system is failing us absolutely. How do we solve these problems? If we continue to use this current model of thinking, we're not going to go anywhere to solving these problems. And we could go further and argue like, well, the way we're trained to think, like we're trained this way so that we don't solve these problems because they're serving like the interests of people in power, right? We need to think outside the box, have ways of thinking that are outside of the traditional STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, right? Standardized teaching. And we've been talking about like what you're saying, you're helping out encampments, right? Mutual aid, direct action, abolition, right? These, feminism, right? Queer theory, we need to start with these kind of ways of thinking get rejected, right? Get these aren't actual ways that you shouldn't be teaching these things in school. We should ban these things, right? So then you're considered a failure when you learn about these things, but you're not. Slaps colorblind people in the face, right? I thought it just said I am black. That would be funny. I am black. It's like a Black History shirt. Not so much the abolition of prisons, but the abolition of a society that could have prisons. Okay, that's good segue. The author brings up abolition, like we need to abolish prisons, right? And really, the point of abolition is like, no, you need to think even more deeper, right? The concept, what we're thinking about is a society that has prisons in it is a failed society. Like that is a society we should not be like living in. Like we need to rethink what we mean by society, and we need to massively restructure society if we have to have structures known as prisons to exist. Right? That's what abolition is about. But and then this whole idea of like, well, what ideas do you have? It's like, dude, like there's so many scholars that have written massive tomes about this. It's just the society doesn't allow people to think about these things, right? Because it like threatens their power, right? That's the issue. Like, of course, like on my channel, I have entire playlists called abolition, which hours and hours of like solutions and like what we could do, right? And it just goes further. That could have slavery. That could have the wage. He says the wage, right? Meaning like a society where you have to actually pay for healthcare. Like, yeah, we just take that for granted, right? I know some societies healthcare is sort of kind of free, but not really. But of course, here in the United States of America, it is not, right? Which is absolutely absurd, right? But people are like, well, that's just the way it is. It's like, no, we need to like not accept that. But more and more people have to get with that program, and not just the way healthcare for a house or like a living space. Like, why are we paying for that? Food. You're actually paying for like the things that that are necessary to survive. Like it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, there we go. Eliminate, and therefore not abolition as the elimination of anything, but abolition as the founding of a new society. Not the elimination of anything, but the founding of a new society. Okay. Abolition as a creative rather than destructive force. Right. So failure as an act of creation rather than an act of loss. Right. Do you know about Viola Desmond down in the U.S.? No, I do not. Let's see. And then I highlighted here. Emphasize mutuality, collectivity, plasticity, diversity, and adaptability. Sorry. Illegibility may in fact be one way of escaping the political manipulation. Subjects who are manipulated precisely when they become legible and visible to the state, undocumented workers, visible queers, racialized minorities. So avoiding co-optation of indigenous practices from dominating power, right, and being othered, right? So as when we get into these systems, and these systems like try and co-opt us, that's when the system says, "Oh, you're a success now," right? That's an interesting thing. It's like, somebody who's in America right now, we got this whole. It's been going on for a while, but for a long ass time actually. But now it's like this hot button issue because now we got the president is really like making it priority number one to like deport undocumented immigrants. But like even just the whole idea of why do you have to be documented? Like the fuck, like a human being is a human being. Like, and you might say like, well, we got to keep track of people because they're getting a free ride, and we need to, they need to go through the proper channels to be, included into our society. It's like, what are you talking about? They're a human being, and just by being a human being, they already should be okay, like, good to go. Like, the fuck, like, it's just absurd. And the same thing when you become, when you reject, like, I'm not really into like marriage. Like, that's just not a thing I want to do. I'm not really into, like, I'm not attracted to the same, to the opposite gender or whatever. And you're like, oh, so you're gay? Oh no, you're a lesbian. Oh no, no, you're transgender. No, you're asexual. That's what you are. Oh, no, you're intersex. No, you're. It's just like, it's like, well, first of all, you're a human being, right? Number one. Second of all, like, maybe you're all of these things or none of these things or like multiple of these things, like the complexity of the human being. But so the point is that we have this system of oppression and discrimination that is like constantly like othering people, trying and labeling people in ways that are dismissing them, right? And by saying like, oh, actually you can't identify who the hell I am. It's like that, which is a failure in like society's point of view, but it's kind of a success because you're showing the flaws of society and like what the exploitative nature and the oppressive, discriminatory nature of like our society, right? So you're bringing out those truths. Okay, so you're saying she is known in Canadian history for challenging racial segregation in Canada by refusing to leave a whites-only area of a movie theater in... Okay, cool. Civil disobedience. My local movie theater has 4 Viola as the Black History theme of this month. Oh, okay, so Canada, y'all got a Black History Month too? That's cool. That's nice. Yeah, that's civil disobedience. That's very effective. Want to think about how to see unlike a state? Want new rationales for knowledge production, different aesthetic standards for ordering or disordering space, other modes of political engagement than those conjured by the liberal imagination? Liberalism is just as unimaginative as conservatism in today's world. Because, liberalism is basically, I guess the new term, which is not new at all, neoliberal, right? That's the new term, which is basically a term kind of thrown at the liberal movement to just tell them, like, you guys are just doing you're just as unproductive as conservative. Well, maybe you're not as unproductive as, but you're very unproductive. Right? You're very unproductive. Yeah, I guess I wouldn't go that far. I would say, like, yeah, because conservative, like, when we're saying conservatives, we're from in the United States of America. What I mean is just people who are like to the right, or wait, to the right. Okay. Yeah, like that camera, stage left to the right, and they're really fucking us over. Whereas the liberals, people more to the left, is like they just ain't doing shit, right? Which is like bad in and of itself. When is your Black History? It's February. It's February too. The shortest month of the year. But for what every month is Black History. But look, I am Black History. But yeah, it's like y'all doing the same month as us. That's cool. Discipline, qualify, and disqualify it. Legitimate and delegitimate. Reward and punishment. Most important, they statically reproduce themselves and inhibit dissent. Spark creative thinking rather than squash it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're talking about failure. This is what failure does. A theoretical production that does not need a visa from some common regime to establish its validity. Right, very important to bring up in these days and ages. We have to untrain ourselves so that we can read the struggles and debates back into questions that seem settled and resolved. Question long-standing assumptions, right? I return back to the lousy philosopher that is Jordan Peterson, which a lot of people argue and say like he's actually not a philosopher, even though he says he is. He's like just a really poor psychologist. But I would argue like no. I mean, you could be a philosopher. You could just be a very bad one. But one of his ideas, it's he's Canadian too, so that's why we're gonna. But Peterson talks about well, if something has been established for a long period of time, then there must be like some sort of truth to it, because why would it still be instilled in our society for so long if it's false, which is so like just idiotic to say. I'm sorry to like. I don't mean to attack him. I'm attacking the idea. Which is just stupid, right? Just because something has been accepted for a long time doesn't mean that it's correct, right? and so, like, well, that's just there must be some reason why it's there. Because it's been around for so long. It's like, no, man. It's like, maybe we've been wrong all this time, right? And that is mostly the case. Like, and there's so many examples throughout history where that's basically how new discoveries and advancements happen. Like, somebody challenges an old idea, and then you find out, you have an eureka moment, like, oh, okay, this is not actually how things are. But he just completely, but what happens is when you challenge these old ideas, you're considered a failure, right? And the reason why you're considered a failure, because you're challenging the power these old ideas fuel the power of those up at the top, right? But if we want to get to truth, that's what we gotta do. Nadia says, he used to live on the same street as me. I never saw him. He was a ways down. He taught at University of Toronto, though, but I believe he got kicked out. That's cool. Like, yeah. I mean, I guess that's funny. It's a small world after all. He used to live on the same street. You never saw him. Maybe you did. You just didn't notice. That's funny. He got kicked out. Yeah, I heard he also lost his license, or he got penalized. Yeah, he got like reprimanded in his psychological license or something, psychology license, practicing, because he just said stupid ass shit that was, and the institution that upholds psychology in Canada was like, yeah, no, we can't like allow this guy to keep saying this nonsense and still have him hold a license in psychology. Right? So, but he has his fans. Whatever. Refuse professionalism, forge a collectivity, retreat to the external world beyond the ivied walls, resist mastery, failure as a refusal of mastery. So you never like refuse mastery. Like people say like, how many books do you? What's the number of books, philosophical books you should read until you consider it an expert? And I would say like, well, I would refuse that idea. I'm just gonna keep reading. I'm gonna keep learning. And will I ever be an expert? No, but it's fine. I'm just gonna keep learning. Okay, so that's that. Analysis as a mode of conversation rather than mastery, okay, can yield a vision of coexistence that does not require making others' life worlds extinct or provisional. Right. Not erasing other cultures and ignoring other ways of life, right? Other beings. Conversation, rather than mastery, indeed seems to offer one very concrete way of being in relation to another form of being, and knowing without seeking to measure that life modality by the standards that are external to it. Privileged, the naive, and nonsensical. So, that's kind of like what we're doing, right? We're just having a conversation, and anybody's free to talk and interject their ideas. Rather than that's kind of one of the reasons why I did the live streams, right? Because I was doing these videos and I was just talking at you, and I'm like, well, let's have it more conversational, open it up to people who may know more and who want to interject and have more of a back and forth, rather than I'm the expert, I'm going to tell you this, and this, and the only way you can interact is through comments. But of course, if you still want to do that, that's fine. I'm just giving room, just giving a little bit more room. Learning is a two-way street. You cannot teach without a dialogic relation to the learner. Exactly. Exactly. All right. Okay, teaching was not in the slightest about cramming students with knowledge and having them repeat it like parrots, but he knew equally, I forgot what he was talking about, but he knew equally well that students had to avoid the chance detours where minds still incapable of distinguishing the essential from the accessory, the principle from the consequence, get lost, while the good teacher leads his students along the pathway of rationality. The ignorant schoolmaster must actually allow them to get lost in order for them to experience confusion and then find their own way out or back or around. So allow failure. Allow failure. Don't be the teacher that says, remember, there are no stupid questions. Right? Allow failure, because then it just let them kind of find their way. What a teacher, a good teacher teaches you how to handle failure well, rather than teaches you how to avoid failure at all costs. Right? Right. I would say. I love this format, as you know. Yep. And then Aditya Gogoi. Yep, sorry, I mispronounced that. Nice place. Oh, thanks. Thanks. Where were we? Incarcerated knowledge. Suspect memorialization. Oh, okay. Am I in the right? 14, 15. All right. Suspect memorialization. So then the author questions memorializing, right? Advocate for certain forms of erasure over memory, precisely because memorialization has a tendency to tidy up disorderly histories of, for example, slavery, Holocaust, wars. As we know, we get a very sanitized view of history, and you gotta watch it. Here in the United States of America, particularly the South, we have to deal with Confederate statues, statues memorializing Confederate war heroes. Strange, right? But of course, that upholds the status quo, right? Even though those generals are traitors to the United States, literally, they did treason, which is one of the highest offenses the United States holds, right? One of them, but there are statues of them, because why? Because they uphold racism, patriarchy, capitalist ideas, that kind of thing. So you get that. So, when something is memorialized, even watch out. Oh, Latrenzo. Hey, what's up? From the UK. Cool. United Kingdom. I saw someone peeking through the door. Ha ha ha. Oh. Probably my wife. A while back. Oh, a while back. Yeah, that's probably my wife. Walking around. Where were we? Oh, yeah, we already said that. Forgetting becomes a way of resisting the heroic and grand logics of recall and unleashes new forms of memory that relate more to spectrality, so spectrum, than to hard evidence, to lost genealogies than to inheritance, to erasure than to inscription. So, e.g., referring to refusing to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. That's a way that's something that he's talking about. Or like, taking a knee during the national anthem, which, remember that when that was a hot thing. Doing those kinds of things, like, I'm just not gonna do that. Because and then it forces people to think like, what? We always did this. People do those type of things, they don't even think, right? But then, when someone stops, of course, you're confronted with all this anti-sentiment, right? This violence at you, right? But the other people are like, well, what does the Pledge of Allegiance actually say? And what does it mean? And is it really true? Or like the national anthem, it's like, what are they actually singing in there? And like, what does it really mean? And should we really be standing for the national anthem? So is that kind of forgetting? What is the course called that you are sitting in? It's called Religion. Let me see. Religion, Art, and Queer Theory. Oh, it's too bright. There we go. Yeah, Religion, Art, and Queer Theory. So it's studying the intersections of these three things, which is highly fascinating. One cannot subscribe to the text of Marxism as if it were etched in stone. He draws attention to the historical specificity of political structures and suggests that we adjust to developments that Marx and Marxism could not predict or otherwise account for. Orthodoxy is a luxury we cannot afford, even when it means adherence to an orthodox leftist vision. Acknowledging and understanding historical context. So, I mean, that's a good point, right? Marx is definitely one of those people that highlights, like, you need to be flexible in your adaptation of philosophy, because there's so many different kinds of Marxists, isn't there? There's Marxist-Leninists, right? There's just Marxists, right? Then there's like communists, but they're like, they're there are various versions of the communists, right? There's people who are like the Marxist-Leninists who are like, communism as a kind of like authoritarianism, or like a kind of a dictatorship of the proletariat, which basically more becomes like a authoritarianism of the vanguard, vanguardism. And then you have communists who are just kind of more like hippie communes, that are like anarchists, but there's so many different. It's like that word, spectrality. It's all a spectrum. So when somebody says like, "Oh, I'm into Marx," it's like, okay, like that doesn't really tell me much. You gotta be a little bit more specific, right? Do you actually perform the Pledge of Allegiance, national anthem, outside of sports events? Do we? No, it's just like sports events, from what I understand. Oh, sing. I'm trying to think, is there any other time the national anthem is sang? Probably military, like Memorial Day stuff, like military celebrations, which we have a lot of here in the United States. We do that a lot, like all this military celebrations. So yeah, that's we sing it there. I mean, I don't, but I don't. You know, I mean, honestly, like I don't even know the lyrics. I guess that's maybe both something I should be proud of and ashamed of. Yeah, there's other times. I think sometimes we sing like during graduations and shit. Yeah, but mostly sports. Mostly sports. Here in Canada. Well, I didn't even know Canada did those things too. Is it daily or week? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Y'all having your own conversation. I will continue reading it. Let's see. We're kind of in here. How much more we got? I guess I could go for another half until my feeding time for my doggy. So let's see. Open here means questioning, open to unpredictable outcomes, not fixed on a telos, unsure, adaptable, shifting, flexible, and adjustable, and open pedagogy in the spirit of, Rancière and Freire. These are philosophers or critical theorists that the author quotes. Also detaches itself from prescriptive methods, fixed logics, and epistemes, and it orients us toward problem solving or social visions of radical justice. Mm-hmm. Cool. And then the author throws out the word hegemony. Is a term of a multi-layered system by which a dominant group achieves power not through coercion, but through the production of an interlocking system of ideas, which persuades. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I woke up at 5 in the morning today, so I'm a little tired, but I'm good. Power not through coercion, but through production of interlocking system of ideas which persuades people of the rightness of any given set of often contradictory ideas and perspectives. All right, so yeah, we often treat like everything in society as a hegemony, like just like a clumping very different things, often contradictory things, into like one thing. Traditional ways of gender, like heteronormativity is like kind of a hegemony, right? Or like that kind of thing, and we got to start getting out of that. Let's see. Common sense, a term, a set of beliefs that are persuasive precisely because they do not present themselves as ideology or try to win consent. All right, so yeah, people will say like, just use common sense. It's like, yeah, but where is this common sense coming from? Like, you shouldn't do that. Why? Well, you should know. Like, maybe not. Like, to sort through contradictions of capitalism and eliminate the oppressive forms of governance that have infiltrated everyday life. Contradictions, not common sense, tell us more about our conditions, right? If you like notice a contradiction in society, it's like, I'm supposed to be this, but that's not actually what I am. In fact, that's directly opposite of what I am, then like, is that a problem? is that a problem of is that your problem, or is that a problem with society? Like, I would argue it's the latter. It depends, but mostly that's what it is. The failures of capitalism give us explanations, right? That's kind of more a Marxist thing, recessions and like, depressions, right? Market crashes, things like that, kind of reveal like, okay, this is a pretty absurd system, right? But just going with the flow and just not questioning things, so we just continually get caught up in this mess. Counter-hegemony was the production and circulation of another competing set of ideas which could join in an active struggle to change society. And I would argue, like, maybe we should think of queerness in that way. Queerness as a counter-hegemony. A counter to heteronormativity. A reality that exists that says, hey, there's other ways of being that are just not that are not heteronormative, right? There's other ways of being. Let me see here. Okay. Sorry, let me, what's going on here? Oh, okay. Text message, but just get an update, which is fine, no problem with that. Where are we at? Economism, too rigid theorization of the relation between base and superstructure. Okay, so economism, I remember this term from when I gave a book, Discourse, from some analysis of Che Guevara, right? Right, where he talks about how it's really, economism is a term thrown around in Marxist-Leninist philosophies, where it's this fixation on economy is like what is going to save everything, and like everything is looked at through economics, and like all problems can be solved through economic solutions, right? But and so I say it's too rigid. It's a theorization between base and superstructure. I would actually argue like Marxist-Leninism kind of does that. But even though they were arguing against it, they kind of do that. But anyway, in order for a system to work, it has to keep creating and maintaining the structures or the structured relation which allow it to function. Right. How capitalism has to keep creating capital for it to exist, right? If it stops, if capital generation stops, then capitalism fails, right? That's an example. But this is not the same as saying that the economic base determines the form of every other social force. Economism only to moralizing and cheap insight, and does not really allow for a complex understanding of the social relations that both sustain the mode of production and can change it, right? Because it's not just economics, right? It's also, gender. Gender plays a huge part, doesn't it? Or race, right? Race, I am Black history. That's what my shirt says. Or, class. And class can be more than economic. There's a social-economic class, but there's also, like, caste, right? There's this caste system. And, there's the country of India has, like, this hardcore caste system that's just kind of more based off of religion. Excuse me. But There's a book that I rated highly on my channel. It's called Caste. It's written by Isabel Wilkersons. Yeah, check that out. She argues that there's actually a caste system in America, and it's based off of race, right? And I kind of agree with that. But what the point is like we are thinking about, society in a multifaceted way with various dimensions like economic, racial, class, gender, many different ways of thinking about it, which are very important to understand like the true nature of the problem, of our problems, right? Like homelessness, the major problems that humanity faces today, I would argue, are like homelessness, huge, right? Huge, or like, of course, climate change, enormous problem, right? And then I would argue social inequity is like a huge problem in our society, despite what many people will tell you, like, no, that's big, right? How do we solve them? Well, some people would argue like, well, it's an economic issue. It's like, well, no, it's a lot more than that, right? It's a lot more than that. Refuse the common wisdom about these movements, i.e. that they were random and not focused on any particular political goal. Instead, they emphasize the power of cooperation within the anti-capitalist mob and pay careful attention to the alternatives that this many-headed hydra of resistant groups imagined and pursued. Okay? Yeah. Many-headed hydra, right? Because it's like what we're saying. It's not just economics. Economics is just one head of the hydra. The more we understand about the development of capital itself, the more we understand that it is only part of the story, right? And that's, we go back to Marxist-Leninist thinking, where it's like capitalism is the problem. And it's like, that's not the only issue. Once we defeat capitalism, everything will be saved. It's like, but then you'll still have issues of racial inequity and like just social and gender problem, inequity, and climate change may still be an issue. They might say like, well, no, it's capitalism creates racism, and capitalism creates environmental damage. Like capitalism is like, it does, but I think if you adopt other social economic models, you can have, as we have seen, right? Like China, now, one could go into a back and forth discussion about what is China really. Is China a true communist society? No, obviously not, right? But the thing is, like, literally, but literally, like, their government is called the Communist, a Republic of China, right? So they call themselves communists, even though they're not. Same thing with like North Korea or something like that. The thing is like you might argue like, well, these things aren't real. They're not real communists, or like they're not real socialists. If they were, then they would. But the thing is, life doesn't work like that. There's never like a society that perfectly adopts a system, right? Like what happens is very fluid, right? So to think that a society will perfectly adopt a social economic system or whatever, like philosophy, is like, it's just not realistic. So what, rather, like, you have to, it's not just about like boogeymanning a specific issue. Like, you gotta look at it multifaceted, is what I'm saying. Let's see. That was 18. Okay, it's 19. The history of alternative political formations is important because it contests social relations as given and allows us to access traditions of political action that, while not necessarily successful in the sense of becoming dominant, do offer models of contestation rupture, and discontinuity for the political present. These histories also identify potent avenues of failure, failures that we might build upon, in order to counter the logics of success that have emerged from the triumphs of global capitalism. So, yeah, that's interesting that that was brought up because, some people will argue, like, yeah, socialism doesn't work because look at all the socialist countries, like USSR and, like, a lot of those Latin American countries that are socialist, like, Venezuela and Cuba and such. They're not doing well. But we got to look at those failures and see, like, well, what went wrong? And a lot of times, like in Latin America, what happens is the American government sends, like, CIA agents down there to, like, instill, like, empower, like, gangsters and shit and fucks it up. So it has really nothing to do with socialism or capitalism. Well, it's an imperialism things, which I guess you could argue is. But it's more like, but then in other instances it's different. Like the USSR, it was a whole different story where it wasn't like American government coming in and infiltrate. It was really just like people who were the vanguard in the USSR got corrupted and power hungry, and so it became more authoritarian than communist, or maybe it never really was communist because that kind of you need to, like, analyze the failures to get closer to, like, true socialism. And as you could, like, as you have heard me say, like, I have many critiques on capitalism, and I would say, like, socialism, the theoretical, like, idea of socialism is very good, very pro that, free, things like free basic necessities. That's awesome, right? But I do kind of oppose the idea that, once you instill socialism, then everything is finished. It's like, well, be careful about that. Or, like, once we defeat, like capitalism is the ultimate problem. I mean, yeah, it's a huge problem. Don't get me wrong, but you're fixating on one thing and you're not thinking about all these other issues. And then you're going to get sidelined, right? They're going to come back and you'll be like, what the fuck? I thought we dealt with this, which has happened throughout history, right? So, so I look at it very, like, multi-lensed, right? Okay, cool. Let's see. Where were we? A dominant history teems with the remnants of alternative possibilities, and the job of the subversive intellectual is to trace the lines of the worlds they conjured and left behind. And we did that with our live stream with Braiding Sweetgrass, didn't we? Where Braiding Sweetgrass was referencing indigenous cultures that were more egalitarian and more like socialist and communist, and, like, kind of praised myths and, like, religious folklore that, like, promoted more socialist, like, gift economies and that kind of mutual aid, and so that's why I really like that book, because it does that. It kind of references alternative possibilities that have actually existed in human history. This idea, like, well, human beings are we're just competitive by nature, and we're like dog eat dog by nature. Is like, well, no, that's just like this thing that was like pushed onto us by propaganda. Right? We were raised to believe this, but that's not always been the case throughout human history. I would recommend you read Braiding Sweetgrass to get some great examples of cultures that did not completely reject that and lived very happily. And then I highlighted, the humanities are the shock to common sense, the estranging move that will always make what we do unintelligible and incalculable, and that may release or catalyze enough energy to blow out a few institutional fuses. She advocates for teachers or to create monsters of their students and to sustain in the process unruly forms of relationality. The pedagogical project of creating monsters. People who question reality, the status quo. Right? Kind of what the Black Ponderer does. I really do like, and I'm sorry, this is like a failure of mine. I don't have my YouTube name isn't very conducive to getting views because it's racial and it like makes people feel uneasy. And advertisers don't like it. So YouTube doesn't push, but who gives? I don't care. I'm a little monster. I'm a little content creator monster when it comes to YouTube. But I am putting a shock to the common sense of the algorithm. I am doing that. I'm estranging the algorithm that makes it unintelligible and incalculable. They can't really calculate my my channel, so they just refuse to be like, okay, we're just not gonna fuck with this channel. Which I'm cool with. I believe in low theory in popular places, in the small, the inconsequential, the anti-monumental, the micro, the irrelevant. I believe in making a difference by thinking little thoughts and sharing them widely. I seek to provoke, annoy, bother, irritate, and amuse. I am chasing small projects, micro politics, hunches, whims, fantasies. And there's a term in activism called agitprop, which is short for agitating propaganda. And that's just like, brochures, flyers, stickers that you just put up, and it just like people see them and it's like, oh shit. Like, like a big ass sign that says abolish the police. And people are like, what? No, you can't do that. That would be insane. Or abolish prisons. Or you give a flyer to somebody, a brochure that explains that. Like, it's agitating. People are like, lots of people aren't ready for that idea, right? But, that's what we need to do. That's what we need to start doing, more and more people, to shake things up. What's going on here? Okay. Even our bodies do not belong to us. We have alienated them in exchange for money or have given parts of them up in war, right? Capitalism alienates. That's like, that's what Marx is. Marx was huge in that. It literally like separates the body from the spirit. Like that's Marx said that, or like inferred that through his political philosophy. What parades as civilization is actually barbarism. I think that's pretty obvious today, right? We're a civilized society, yet like, if we use my country, America, gun violence at school is now normal. It's like a normal thing, right? School shoot-ups are like something that happens not infrequently anymore, right? Which is like, wow, really? Like we've gotten to this part? Like, at first, there was a time when that was just, it would happen, but it would be like unacceptable. Well, first of all, there was a time when that shit just, would only happen. I guess that would always happen in like low income neighborhoods, like the one I grew up in, right? But not to this scale, right? Because people have more access to, these semi-automatic weapons and shit, so they can, and the American society has just, not all of us, a lot of us are like protesting in front of Capitol, in front of like the city capitals and stuff, trying to get these political officials to listen, but they're not listening. They're not here in Tennessee, right? They could care less. But yeah, like we're a civilized society, but school shootings are just a normal part of our way of life now, which is like, what is that? It's barbarism, right? But we call ourselves a civilized society, I always bring up the example of the most, most common reason for people to declare bankruptcy is because of healthcare bills. I'm sorry, what? And we should be proud to be an American citizen when that's the reality of our country. I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud that most, the main reason in a country I live in, people lose all their money because they can't. The reason why most people lose all their money, the loss of most of their money is most commonly associated with their inability to pay for health care. It's not because they were reckless. It's not because they had a gambling problem. It's not because they spent too much money on a race car or something. No, it's because they were they needed insulin for diabetes and they couldn't get it. And now they have no more money. It's it's barbarism, right? Let's just point this out. And the animal, human, beasts, and spirited things insinuate that humanism is nothing more than an ideology. Right? The idea of what it means to be human has been constructed. Therefore, the idea can be deconstructed. It's we're human beings, so we need to, what does that even mean? Human beings are so cruel to each other, but that's been a construct, right? So we can redefine that. We can reconstruct it. We can deconstruct it and then build it back up again. And then with his low theory again, where he talks about lowbrow art, cartoons as a pedagogical opportunity, a chance for children to see the evil that lies behind the facade of bourgeois respectability, and for adults to recapture the vision of magical possibilities that were so palpable in childhood. They engaged in transformative violence, and they took humor rather than tragedy as their preferred medium for engaging the audience. He's referring to old school Disney, but I would say Looney Tunes kind of did that too back in the day. Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, they would throw animals at each other. But it's funny because you don't really see the Looney Tunes anymore. Because they're very violent cartoons, but in a funny way. And I can see where he's coming, transformative violence as humor, kind of a dark humor type of thing, which is important. I will say a lot of that Looney Tunes stuff was pretty problematic, right? It wasn't just the violence thing. It was the objectification of women, literally the samboing, I forgot what the minstrel shit. They would Elmer Fudd used to be just a parody of a black man, right? That kind of a lot of that minstrel shit was in the Looney Tunes. So not all of it was the best. Even he refers to Disney. Even the early Disney cartoons were kind of based off of minstrel shit. A lot of that parodies of black people. To be completely honest with you, so I think the author might have missed the mark there, but there are some good things about it as well. I liked Looney Tunes as a little kid. Before I still like Looney Tunes, but when I was a little kid, I didn't really realize a lot of the subliminal messaging that it had, that it kind of promoted. Not only violence as a way to solve problems, but kind of just being a jerk to solve problems, and also kind of the whole racial undertone, the racist undertones and the sexist undertones. Why is it that American society seems against universal health care? Because we're a bunch of idiots. Americans are dumbasses. That's a lot. I wish we would just be honest about that. I wish we would just be brutally honest and say if you're against universal health care, you are a moron. You're an idiot. I'm sorry, but it's true. But and so most Americans are just not educated. Uh, and that's why it may not provide the best service, but it protects your most valuable members, bankruptcy stress. And yeah, they'll throw all these examples. It's like, well, in Canada, you gotta wait like 6 months. I hear that's how it is in the UK too. In the UK, like healthcare, maybe you don't have to pay as much, but you have to wait a long ass time. And so a lot of Americans will get that as a counterexample. They'll be like, oh, but you have to wait so damn long. It's like, dude, let's just figure out a better system. Like, it's not hard. Like, it's not. The only reason why it's hard is because you see healthcare as like some sort of business model, and we shouldn't be looking at healthcare as like a business model. Like, what the fuck? Like, healthcare should be like a public service. Like, huh? Yeah, we make it seem so difficult, but it's really not, right? So yeah, I mean, that's another reason why American society is so against universal health care, because in America, like, everything is like a business. Everything has to do with like earning money, even like basic necessities. We just believe like, oh, it's the economy. Like, you have to pay. Nothing is free in the world. Like, we have this stupid ass notion of like nothing is free. Everything you have to pay for. Everything is like, oh, so I have to pay for the air that I breathe. Like, I have to pay for that too. I mean, we do have to pay for water. Apparently, it should be also free, but I understand like water has to be sanitized and like filtered out and shit. But we can make it work, but we choose not to. But you get treated extremely fast, in my opinion, at least in Ontario. Okay, now, I have no idea. That's just what I've been told by people. And I'm always skeptical of that kind of shit. Like, people say that kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't live there. But I just know like our country is shit when it comes to healthcare. So we could do better. But that's cool that it's where you're from. It's pretty fast. As for the long, it depends on how serious your issue is. Okay. Yeah, I just hear stories. I mean, I do have a friend who lives in United Kingdom, and she's like, she's adamant, like, I'm getting the fuck out of this country, and then healthcare is like a huge reason. She doesn't think the United Kingdom, the healthcare system in the United Kingdom she thinks is horrible because of the waiting times are so long. But that's just her experience. Maybe that might not be indicative of like all citizens of the United Kingdom, but she has very negative things to say about the United Kingdom. I just tell her like, well, at least it's not as bad as here in America. Because in America, not only you're waiting on healthcare because you can't fucking afford it. Like, so you have to like save up and shit. But yeah. Also, we have the number 3 top hospital in the world. Cool. If you want. You could still pay for private if you want. Oh, I mean, I'll explain it to you. Like, it's propaganda, like Nadia said. One, it's like, so people just think it's just not a thing that could happen due to propaganda. But also there's this selfishness that goes into play. It's this idea like not everybody deserves to be helped, because people have to work to get good things. Like, that's one of the fundamental principles of American thinking. It's like this idea that if you want good things to happen to you, you have to work for it. Like, you can't get it for free. Even though like that's the biggest hypocrisy, because like the richest Americans don't work a day in their fucking lives. Right? But, like these rich, like Elon Musk did. He inherited his fortune. Like, say Jeff Bezos got like grants from his like mother and father and shit. He used like what is his I know I forgot what the name of it's called Sky Blue or something, I forgot. But Amazon has like, Jeff Bezos owns like a space company, and and the first headquarters was like um, a property that was owned by his like grandparents or something. That just gave him like this ranch that he could use to build like what it's his space thing or something. Like take your pick for any rich motherfucker. Like Mark Zuckerberg, same thing. He got privileged. He got sent to like computer science summer camps and shit when he was like a little kid. So he was able to learn like computer programming like at the age of 12 or something. I mean, did he earn that? No. To anybody like. So that's just the biggest lie. But we just buy into that shit because it's propaganda. Uh, but it is what it is. My friend is from Ukraine and it is against communism, and he doesn't agree that Russia never achieved communism, true communism. Well, it's true. Like, so your friend believes like Russia did achieve true communism. It just, first of all, what is your definition of communism? First of all, because that's something we need to establish from the get go, because I mean that's a common mistake that is made. People will argue about communism, and then they got two different ideas of what communism is. So that's the first thing. I would. I would argue, if you're thinking, if the idea is communism is like authoritarianism, like the whole vanguard is in charge and they force their will onto people, which is what a lot of people think of. Like Marxist Leninists believe that's what communism is. Like, yeah, I'm against that shit. And Russia did achieve that. But my definition of communism is like you just share resources for everybody, right? Not, complete, not paying for basic necessities that you need to survive, right? Which is not like actually the same thing as Marxist Leninist communism, right? Because they are like it's all about work, right? Labor is like the ultimate value of a person, right? Maybe that's what's happening. Differing definitions of communism. Yeah, because some people like I have friends like that who are from the Cambodia and like a lot of those eastern southeastern Asian countries like Vietnam, where to them communism just means war, right? It literally or it just means dictatorship. Or like horrible regime. A lot of people from some Latin American countries, they think like that. Like they see communism as like they equate it to like war, right? Or like corrupt governments, because a lot of those communist governments were extremely corrupt. So that's what I'm saying is like there's the theory of communism, and then there's like putting it into practice. So the problem is like you fixate on the theory, but you're not putting into consideration other problems like patriarchy, for example, which can really fuck things over. Like you might instill communism, but you still have this, highly misogynistic idea of things, right? So that'll fuck things over real fast, or you might be like very racist or something, but you might have and some people would argue like, well, in a communist system, there is no room for racism. There's no room for patriarchy. There's no room for homophobia. No, that's not true at all, right? There's room for all that shit in the communist system. So you gotta worry about those things too, right? I'll be right back. I actually have to feed my doggy now because it's time, but it's just 1 minute. I'll be right back. his argument is that we can't share resources. It's been tried. That is always oppressive. Yeah, so he just, that's a common thing. Belief that, human beings we're just competitive by nature. We're just not cooperative beings, which is bullshit. As you know, because you read Braiding Sweetgrass, where there's many different indigenous cultures that have shared resources in the past, right? But what happens is European colonists came and just obliterated them, right? But before they came, they were all very successfully sharing resources and doing fine. There's many examples throughout human history where egalitarian societies and communist-like, or whatever you want to call it, were very successful at that. But there's this erasure campaign that's happening where people they can't reference that stuff because, thank you to all those fucked up schools in Canada and Europe and Canada and America and all the other Americas that erased all that shit and obliterated the whole history of indigenous histories, right? Cute dog. So he believes that Russia is an example of communism not working well. I would just hand him here's Braiding Sweetgrass. Come to me when you finish reading that. And then, and there's other books too. I can refer to him as, but that's a lot of new history because throughout what this text is talking about, failure. You study those cultures, and that's considered a failure, right? That's considered no, we don't study those cultures. We only study Eurocentric cultures. We only study westernized cultures, right? So you never have the opportunity to learn about all of these cultures and societies throughout history that actually have been successful in a kind of communist model, right? But yeah, so I would just refer to your friend to what about all these cultures that have done all this? What do you have to say about that? He was an advocate of being cooperative. The only way we exist in community is not individually. But the USSR did share resources greatly, especially in the most outer regions. If you go to the ex-USSR countries, you'll see investment in the ends of USSR. Yeah, but what about all the the amount of people that starved to death during Stalin's run, right? What about all those people? We know there was the huge famines that happened where people literally starved to death. They weren't sharing resources with them. And, I'm not knocking. I'm a fan of the theory of communism, but I don't I do push back because I talk to a lot of people particularly Marxist-Leninists who look at somebody like Stalin like he's a god or something. It's dude, Stalin was a horrible person. He was a horrible leader. He really his actions killed lots of people. I'm not saying I'm not saying United States presidents are good either. They're horrible too. But you gotta look at these people realistically. Sure, but I'm sure the USSR, while it was active, there were plenty of good stuff happening in the USSR, but there was also a lot of bad shit happening in the USSR too. Particularly, there was resources were not being shared amongst the entire, because we know there was huge famines and shit that happened in the USSR. Same thing with China, communist China, with Mao. When he was in charge, a lot of people died under Mao because they starved to death, right? Or they failed, but a lot of people were very successful, lived successful under Mao too. It was two different things happening at the same time, completely So what we're saying is, you know, and then you can argue like, so it's various different things you could argue, right? You could say like, well, communism wasn't instilled properly, or you could say like, well, no, communism was instilled properly. That's why it didn't work, because it's literally impossible to do to achieve the demands of communism, because you can't. It's not. The human beings are capable of doing that. It's like, I call bullshit on that too. I would just say, like, I would go refer back to the text where it's like, well, the problem isn't just like the defeat of capital. Like, it's not just like capital isn't the only problem here. There are other problems too that we need to like focus on as well. Like hoarding power to the state. That's an issue too. When you have, we gotta look at the state as a, because a lot of these communist countries were communist states, and that state power, you gotta question that. But now I'm getting into like theories of anarchism, right? Structures of government where those type of things can happen too. You have to consider. You gotta really think deeply about this stuff, right? Can we say hi to your dog? He was standing in the door. Yeah, he just wanted more food. I don't think he's gonna come. I guess I could just give a treat right quick. Let me get a treat. Oh, there you go. You want a treat? Oh. Okay, here you go. Hey, doggy. That's all I got. That's it. That's all I got, man. He's like, no food? I'll just go back to bed. He's cool. He's cool. He's just like, he just cares about food. Yeah, we're pals. Like, I'm not really his. Oh, his name is Balky. Yeah, Balky. Yeah, we're more like buddies than we are. I'm not like it. I don't consider myself his guardian. I'm like his pal. But you gotta be a guardian, right, for a dog, or he'll like run out and chase a squirrel, get run over by a car or something. So you gotta restrict some. You gotta do some parental things. But we're more like, do you cuddle? No. Yeah, he likes. My wife allows him to sleep in the bed, in our bed. So he just, and dogs just like to do that dog pile thing. So yeah, we do. He does do that, which is fine. So what do you say if someone says communism was attempted by Russia and it failed? I say exactly what I'm talking about now. I say exactly. I'm like, yeah, I say exactly what I'm talking about now. I'm like, well, when you're obsessed with like that whole like that kind of communism, and it is a kind of communism, there's different kinds of communism. There's that Marxist-Leninist shit that's like, believes in like this vanguard that, for some reason the vanguard is special and they know all the rules and nobody else doesn't. And then they get all the power, and they tell everybody else what it is. They say like a dictatorship of the proletariat, dictatorship of the working class, but that's not really what's happening, right? what's happening is an authoritarian regime is like telling everybody what to do, right? And that's what they define as communism, right? And that's why that fails, because that ultimately that's not sustainable, right? So and so that's why for me it's like I don't fixate on like those kinds of terms like communism, socialism. Like for me it's like, can we just like be kind and compassionate with each other? Like I say, like, yeah, I think we should have free healthcare. We should have free housing. We should have free food, free water. And somebody might counter and say like, well, that's socialism. I'm like, okay, if that's what you want to call it, fine. But I don't really see it. I don't label it like that. I'm just saying like we should be compassionate to people. And they might be like, well, that doesn't work because of Russia. It's like, dude, like Russia that wasn't their aim. That wasn't their objective. They weren't like, the USSR wasn't trying to do that. Right? Their aim was something else. So it's a bad example. Like, show me a society that actually is trying to like do that for its people. Then we could talk. That's all I'm saying. Where are we at? Well, that would be accurate, but I'd also say it could have continued and maybe failed later if the higher ups allowed it to. Yeah, it's just like an obsession with power. They're just, they got really power hungry. Stalin, Lenin, and all those other Russian dictators. They're like, I want more power, me, and of course, like that's what they care about. They, ultimately, like, did they care about the theory of communism? No, they just wanted power. And so if they didn't care so much about power, then it could have lasted longer. But yeah, we're good pals. Let's see. I'm not a communist anyway. My interest in it is more to do with having an alternative way of life instead of what we have today, where it's largely the same across most countries. I think that theory, that communism as like, hey, let's all just live and we don't have to work. Like we work when we want to. And we just, of course, like you're gonna, let's not fool ourselves. You're gonna have to work, right? You gotta like build shit, right? You gotta like maintain society. But there's this idea like, well, people are lazy and not everybody's gonna contribute to society. It's like, I don't believe that. I think like, you have this model that we have today where people are tired and shit because they're working long hours, or they're like mentally tired because they're getting brainwashed constantly. And so there's this tapping out that is called laziness. But I think if we lived in a world where we didn't have to pay for basic necessities, people would be willing to contribute. Or if not, then we could develop a better system where like, okay, get your ass up. You gotta do this now, right? I think we can make a better system. Like, I like that kind of communism, like that kind of like, people just live in a house that they don't pay for. It's comfortable. They could just go to a communal place to eat, nice stuff, or they can make their own shit. People are growing their own produce. It just, there's like community gardens and shit. Like, that's cool. I think that could work, right? Education is like awesome, and like you're not just focusing so much on like STEM, you're like actually focusing on humanities and art as well, right? That's cool. And higher education is completely free. That would be nice. Is that communism? Okay, like some people will call that communism, but for me it's like, that's just human decency. That's like base human, compassion. But a lot of people don't feel that way. They call it communism. So I don't know. I think we get too fixated in these terms, and then we get lost in this theoretical shit where it's like, dude, like let's just do things that are are conducive to the well-being of human beings. Like, I don't know. Instead of like doing shit that just makes rich people richer, that's I don't know. Is Marxism not great in your opinion? I mean, again, it literally depends on what kind of Marxism you're talking about, because certain Marxism is horrible. Like Marxist-Leninism, that's shit in my opinion. Sorry, it's too bad because I have friends who are Marxist-Leninists, and those friends are cool. I like those friends. I just think the theory is like really like bad, and it's very short-sighted. It's very reductive, I think. So that kind of Marxism, I guess that's Marxist-Leninism, which isn't necessarily Marxism. I think Marx, it just depends on what you mean by Marxism. I've as you know, I've read, I've featured videos, I've read Capital volumes, all the volumes, and I've read the Communist Manifesto, and I guess, yeah. Well, we will return to Marx because he wrote a few other things like the Grundrisse or whatever it's called. I gotta read that one day. But I hear it's just like the Grundrisse is like Capital light, so I don't know. But I think like what he wrote was a very fair criticism, a very astute, fair, a very intelligent critique of the current social economic system that is capitalism. Like he really broke that down. I think that he is very intelligent, and that's a great critique of capital, and I jive very well with that critique. I'm like, yeah, this guy knows what. And then he also like actually references data from various economic records and makes his point across, which is very nice. It's a great critique of capitalism, right? That is exploitative, that is alienates the human, the laborer, that it benefits only a small few people, and that it eventually implodes upon itself, right? And all those things are true, right? As we see throughout history. The problem with Marx is he wrote that inevitably capitalism will fail, right? Which that's not going to happen, right? The world will be destroyed before capitalism ends, right? Right? He had this idea that capitalism will it's inherently self-destructive, like it will eventually be destroyed. It is like no, that's not, because he didn't anticipate, because he's not a fortune teller. He didn't realize like we're going to have stuff like the cell phone. Or the smartphone, where you have like a computer in your pocket, that entire entertainment device in your, where you can just zone out and watch movies, Netflix all day, or like play video. He didn't imagine the PlayStation 5 where people could just drone out, or like, he didn't envision things like YouTube where people can just escape the world, right? I mean, these are things that capitalism has given us, right? And it sanitizes, or like it sedates people, right? And that's how like capitalism continues to survive, right? Through that kind of offering of all this kind of like escapist luxury. It does implode. We have recessions and market crashes all the time, but people are able to zone out because they just like they love their commodities and their products, right? Let's see. My most productive times were when I was on employment insurance, volunteering in my community all week instead of working for an exploitative company. Right, right. Because that's why eventually we're gonna read Bullshit Jobs by Dean Spade, I think it is. That's the name of the author, right? Oh, David. Oh no, not Dean Spade. My bad. David Graeber. That's why I looked. David Graeber, which talks about that very thing. Yeah, we're going to talk about that eventually. let's see. So I think of it as how I would be if universal basic income was a thing. Doing real work, yeah, or just doing meaningful work, or like work, yeah, yeah. But I understand what you're saying. Work that actually like advances the human species, right? That like it benefits the human species, right? You know, that kind of work, right? As opposed to like a lot of what we do today. I agree with your view. I also think if people had their basic needs met, then they do the undesirable jobs society needs, and even if they didn't, they'd be a way to force them if necessary. Just like there are ways to force people to do jobs under the current model, and we'd find a way under a different system. I mean, of course, yeah, because people will say that kind of shit, you know. But yeah, you're right. You're right. You know, people say like, well, how are you going to get people to work if they don't have an incentive? It's like, I don't know, maybe because they're just bored out of their mind and they just want to do some shit. I don't know. I mean, I would do stuff, you know, like I would collect garbage, you know, if nobody else is doing it. I'll be like, okay, it's my turn. I'll do it. I'll collect the garbage. Just like I take out the garbage. You know, I mean, I think we'll be able to figure this stuff out, and like even the unpleasant jobs. And then you never know. There's some people that might be like, hey, I like doing this. But of course, there's always going to be, there's situations where like, okay, this job needs to be done and nobody's going to do it. We got to like figure out some sort of like jury duty selection system, or, you know, kind of like how we do the jury duty thing, right? It'll be something like that. Work that is meaningful either for yourself or for the community, likely both at the same time. Yeah, probably both at the same time, right? Even if you're creating art, like, you know, some people are going to vibe with that art. Be like, wow, that's pretty cool. You're going to provide joy and meaning to them. I'm reading about workplace cooperatives, and when people have ownership in a company, they feel way happier to do menial work. Yeah, that's cool. Ownership, a company. I mean, it'll never happen, but I fantasize about the day when there is no company. Like, companies are just not a thing. So like ownership for a company, fuck it. In this world we don't, this alternative reality, there is no such thing as companies. It's just people that just do work, do tasks to advance society, right? And maybe it's like an organization or whatever, but there's no, but yeah. That's the kind of like thinking we need to go toward. But yeah, I want to start or be part of a worker-owned co-op. Yeah, I mean, you gotta take your baby steps, and you gotta step toward the right direction. So that's cool. Also, you being able to express your creativity will make you feel more fulfilled. Yeah. And your fulfillment will likely spread into the community with benefits as well. I mean, we just letting the people know. I'm in a time of my life when I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to work. Because unfortunately I have to work under capitalism to stay afloat, as we all do. You just do what I do and just work for a job, that you don't care about, and then just went off the clock. You just do things that you care about. I mean, that's pretty horrible, but that's where I'm at. Because you got to pay the bills. I think might not be too fast to dismiss that, because that might work. You might like, look, dude, I just got to do a job, and maybe focus on getting a job that's eventually will pay relatively well, but you might not necessarily care. Unfortunately, we live in a world where you might have to like do a side hustle in terms of like you got to do something to get your money, and then you got to do something that fulfills you, and it's more and more the case that these two things they're not aligned. As we move forward, like generation, the Zoomers and Generation Alpha are just not going to like have that anymore. I mean, I didn't have, as a Generation Y person, I don't have it. Generation X was losing. The Boomers, they had that, but yeah, it's not looking good. So we might want to like have to look more realistically and maybe compromise a little bit more, sadly. But that's capitalism. It's horrible. I'm trying to see if I can work somewhere that makes a good impact, but not sure. I'm not a fancy person, so I don't need a lot of money. Well, there you go. So that'll be easy. Maybe you could work for a nonprofit or something. I understand the whole like nonprofit industrial complex, which, yeah, I get it. They're not all, but it's better than working for like J.P. Morgan. I don't know. What is the relationship between new forms of animation and alternative politics today? So he's still talking about like animation. Yeah, he's saying like animation is very progressive. I'm not really. Well, I mean that's not true, right? Well, I was raised off of like Ren and Stimpy and Doug Funny and and all those early Nicktoons and Rugrats. They were cool. But then like nowadays you have like Adventure Time and Steven Universe. I guess that's old now, right? I like. Yeah, what is that? Generation Z. They have all these cartoons that are like, I'm like, wow, these cartoons are like deep as fuck, and they're like highly philosophical. Like, I didn't have that when I was growing up. I just had like Ren and Stimpy and shit, which was cool. That was funny. I guess Rugrats are cool, but now it's like, y'all cartoon Generation Z cartoons. They deal with like, they bring up shit like depression, ableism, anxiety. They talk about mental health. I'm like, damn, you guys got some deep ass cartoons for kids. Even stuff like Avatar and like Korra and shit. I'm like, whoa. So I guess it's true. Like some of these animations really do project alternative politics. Do you try to work at a place that is impactful? I gave up on that. I'm like, look, under capitalism, I do a lot of volunteer work that's very fulfilling. Yeah, I do a lot of non-paid work that's impactful. I do like, so I work for FedEx and I work in their safety department, and I make sure that they are safe. The company is safe because it's dangerous jobs working next to an aircraft. Loading packages, like flying the aircraft. As there was a horrible aircraft crash that happened involving the military apparently. So I mean that was crazy. So I'm actually part of the team that helps prevent those things happening for FedEx aircraft, which is good. Good aircraft safety is very important. But I don't consider myself like a brain surgeon or nothing like that, and like I don't like clock out, I don't walk out of the office thinking like, yes, I saved so and so, I feel so good, like and that's not where my mind is when I do that kind of work. But I get a lot of fulfilling work in other in my volunteer stuff, my non-paid stuff. Castaway, yeah. Which was like product placement galore. I think FedEx like paid huge amounts of money to be placed in that movie. Funny enough. The meaning of failure as a way of being in the world allow for the fact that failure is also unbeing, and that these modes of unbeing and unbecoming propose a different relation to knowledge. Failing well, failing often in learning, how to fail better. Failure as a practice. That sounds like a business book. But I see, the author is definitely not. He doing this. I think it's like there's a famous business book called like Failing Well or some shit. Let me see. Or maybe I'm thinking about something else. Like failing hard and fast. Or maybe, okay, I must be thinking about something else. I think I'm thinking about the book Thinking Fast and Slow, which is like kind of a business book. What do you think about business degrees? It's fine. If you want to, if you're trying to like, hey, yeah, I wouldn't get a business degree because I could care less about that shit. But I guess if somebody's like, look, man, I'm just trying to get my money. I'm just trying to live my life and get my money. Then I guess business degree worked well for you. But yeah, I think somebody who's trying to get a business degree, like that's where their mind is at. They're like, look, I'm just trying to get mines and for me and my family. And like, I'm not trying to be like a social activist or like I'm not trying to save the world. I just want my picket fence, right? I think those are the kinds of people who get business degrees, which no judgment for me. I'm not trying to do that. Some of the most important intellectual leaps take place independently of university training. There you go. Or in its aftermath, or as a detour around and away from the lessons that disciplined thinking meets out. To turn away from the quarrels that seem so important to the discipline and to engage the ideas that circulate widely in other communities. Right, so let's look at other communities outside Eurocentrism. I keep mispronouncing that word. Where we can find alternative politics, alternative ways of like governing, or like not even governing, like ways of social interaction. Yeah, and that's it. In terms of my highlights, let me stack it up. Okay, well, I kind of did a close reading of this work, and that was fun. I think I'm gonna be doing this type of thing for several live streams in the future. Unless maybe somebody has a recommendation or a special request, but I think I'll keep doing it. We got a lot of interesting texts that I could go over that will spark very interesting conversations, I think, and we could all, as a dialogue thing, as usual, people can always interject with things, and we can go on tangents. Nothing wrong with that. Like we said hi to Balky. That was fine. But Balky is like one of those dogs that just he's like he should live on a ranch. He's just one of those. He just preoccupies. He's not like he likes to cuddle, but he's like an outdoor dog. But it's too bad. We live in the city, so that just ain't gonna happen. I'm glad you tried out my request. Oh, like the braiding sweetgrass one? Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, it was cool. Okay. I guess it's time to check out here. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. You were skeptical. Yeah. Let's see how much views that got. Because I don't think it would have gotten any more views. Cancel. Let me see here. If I made it as a standalone video. So I think that's cool. I guess my biggest concern was like, by making it a live stream, will I detract from it from being viewed? Because it deserves, like, I think that book deserves like a lot of eyes on it. But it's got 193 views, which is a lot. Yeah, that's a lot. Compared to like those kinds of books that I read. I mean, it's it's a lot for my channel. But yeah, I see some of these books. I don't know. I might have actually gotten more views if it was not a live stream, but it doesn't matter. It does. It's there. We engage. If people want to see it, it's there. Uh, yeah, it was a lot for a live stream. It was a lot, so that's cool. But basically, what happened was exactly what I thought was going to happen, which is totally fine. Was not expecting like a huge, like 30 people talking about. Yeah, no, that's just not. Maybe one day, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. I would need like to buy one $800 camera for that, and like one of those lights that has like an umbrella that's like reflecting light, so I can have like actual studio lighting. And I would need like a a Steam Deck, one of those command center things that you push a button and it switches scenes and shit. Then like if more people would hop on and watch. You could cut it up and post it as a video, but not sure if that's a good idea because it'll be duplicated. Yeah, it'll be duplicated, and plus that's a lot of work. I just don't. That's me being lazy. I'd rather not do that. It's there. I want to thank all people for watching the stream, whether it is currently or or later on, because I see most people watch the streams later, which is totally fine. That's cool. And I understand not everybody's on during Saturday evenings, nights. Yep, even my wife left to hang out with buddies. So it makes sense. Are you doing a live next week? Probably. Let's see. Let's see the schedule. I don't think I have anything crazy going on. Let's see here. 2 p.m. base building. Yeah, I might try for Sunday again. Because Saturday, it's like, I know people... Saturdays. But then Monday is, Sunday is tough too because I do it late and people got to go to work Monday. So I don't know. Well, we'll see. This is over 200. Yeah, the live streams are getting longer because a few people are asking questions, which are great. That's cool. And feel free, I'm on a live stream, but sometimes people will send me emails, or like, if you want to just shoot the shit so at another time. You don't have to be on these streams. I'm open to talking to all. I'm a member of. I remember old school internet where we used to do that all the time. We used to just talk to random ass people. Also got all my social medias. That I basically use to talk to random strangers, which is totally cool. And that's cool too. And then we got the Discord, but I think you got to be a member of the Patreon to do that. But you can always just we can talk on Discord to just personal PM. You don't have to be on my server. There's people, it's interesting because, I appreciate some people are very high tier patrons, but I invited them on the server and they're like, they haven't responded. So I guess they're just like, hey, I'm just trying to give you money, man. I ain't trying to do all the rest, which is, hey, I'll take that. I'll take that. I'll take that. But the server is there. It's, we'll have more like, we can have our own little book club and things like that for Patreon. But there's patrons who just are at that tier, but they're like, nah, I'm not trying to do that. So, but that's cool with me. I'll take it. But I just thank you kindly. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's like a $5 thing. Because that honestly that is a lot of work. I'd have to like. It could be fun, but it is like I would have to like. I'm already reading a lot, but that's by choice. But I'm just saying like, gotta. It would be a lot of work. So that's why it's like a little higher tier, right? That's cool. Have you spoke on the war in Ukraine in any recent video? I don't think I have. I know I spoke about a lot of the war in Gaza, which I guess kind of sort of ended, but not, still lots of shit going on there. Our president just said, we're going to take over Gaza and we're going to kick them out. Like, you dumbass motherfucker. So, I talk a lot about Palestine. I don't think I talked a lot about Ukraine, but it's the same song and dance as like, an imperialist country is going in trying to like claim its territories to exploit its resources and its people, and it's just fucked up. It's just really fucked up, and I don't support that at all. It's the same shit. I mean, it's the same shit's been happening. Russia has been doing that shit. I remember as a little kid, I'd have, I got a lot of, I guess I did talk about it. I definitely brought this up where I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and we got a lot of refugees of Eastern European kids, like young, 6, 7-year-olds. When I was that age, they flee from their countries because Russia, was like doing the same shit they're doing to Ukraine, right? They were in there as, so yeah, it's horrible. It is absolutely horrible. Disgusting what Trump said. Disgusting. Oh yeah, he's. But he got the popular vote and he got the electoral. I didn't vote for the jackass, but but here we are. Let's see here. Okay. If there's no other comments or questions, it's time for me to log out. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you later. I'll take a few more seconds here, just to make sure I don't miss anything. I'm an outsider, but there was nothing appealing regarding Kamala for what I could see. Yeah, no, Kamala sucked. Just like Biden. Just like President Biden. He was like not appealing either. But, I mean, he was better than Trump, and so was Kamala Harris was better than Trump, too. A lot better. Like, I'm not, Kamala Harris was shit, And, it's interesting because I grew up, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. She's from this. Kamala Harris was born in the city that I was born in, Oakland, California. We're from the same city, so that would have been cool if the president of the United States was born in the same city as me. She's from Oakland, California, like me, and she was like, she was district attorney of San Francisco. During I was living, Oakland and San Francisco are right next to each other. So I used to hang out in San Francisco all the time. Got many friends in San Francisco. And then she became Attorney General of California. I remember, and she had this whole tough on crime bullshit that she ran on, and people ate that shit up hook, line, and sinker. And it was just like, you're just a fucking cop, But so she had that going for her, that people did not. And she wasn't not that good, as she just pushed a lot of tough on crime rules in California. The same you know, she's very, she's one of those type of people, like really like Law and Order. So that wasn't very appealing. It's just interesting because I remember those times as a kid. I was like, man, I remember she literally put the crack down and put a lot of people in prison and shit. But this was way before she became vice president under Biden. But like Nadia is saying, like, she's nowhere near as bad as Trump. And I'll be honest and say that, like, I'm okay with picking the lesser of the two evils, right? Because we wouldn't have this ICE shit going on, right? Immigration, agency crap. That people are, all this crap. I don't know. I just feel like the choice was obvious, and people was like, I don't give a fuck. And I think that was pretty heartless of people to do that. I think that was very inconsiderate and just lacked compassion, and like this idea of like they can't choose lesser than because it violates their principles or whatever, or like it's like a child, right? A child does that when they're like they can't get what they want, so they just throw a tantrum or they quit completely. Like children do that. Like the real world isn't like that, right? The real world, like you gotta make difficult decisions. Like you got to like oftentimes in life you got to pick between two very bad decisions. Like you have bad options, you have to pick the better of the two. Like that's life. That's what it means to be an adult, right? But people just couldn't do that. Yeah. But and then so there's that. But then so there's a lot of like people from the left were that thinking like that, and then there's all these like conservatives and people from the right that were like, hey man, when Trump was president, my bank account was looking good, but now it's not. So I just want my bank account to look good. Yeah, but like, what about like undocumented immigrants and queer people and transgender people? Like, they're like, I don't give a fuck about those people. I just want my bank account to be, they could care less. Yeah, but what about all these unarmed black people? Like, I don't give a fuck about that shit. Like, just, it's just nobody cares anymore, and everybody's checking out. He's either like life's too hard, so people are like, fuck it, I'm just gonna binge watch Severance or something. Just like not do anything. And so that's why capitalism doesn't fall, because people are just like, hey man, I got Netflix, I got like my Taylor Swift album, Taylor Swift's version, Midnight or whatever, Poets Society or whatever the fuck it's called. People just escape into that shit. Meanwhile, the world is on fire. It's just, I don't know. I just wish people would just care more. But people are just so, that we got to get back to that. We got to get back to people actually giving a fuck, because so many people just don't care anymore. If it's not you, you don't care. And a lot of it is brainwashing. That's true. A lot of it is just like, people are tired, and it's the apathy, and then they just become apathetic. It's like, well, who cares who's president? It's like the world's not. No, actually, it does matter, but whatever. I could go on and on and on about that, but it is what it is. Let's see. I don't think she'd be worse than Trump. I just didn't see anything special about her that would make someone in the middle or right want to vote for her. The thing that was special about her was like that she was not Trump, and that cannot be stressed enough. Like, I'm sorry, but I know a lot of people disagree with that. People are like, well, they're the same. It's like, no, they're not fucking the same. Like, they really are not the fucking same. Like, and that's what people don't understand. But we're seeing it now. Literally, we have a president who does not believe climate change is real. Like, he's like, I'm investing in oil. I am, he's like defunding all like, these renewable energy shit. Like, what is that going to do for the world? Like, we're already headed toward Armageddon, and he's like, Kamala Harris wouldn't have done that. Like, she would have like actually taken steps to like at least try, but now we're definitely absolutely gonna go to like environmental Armageddon now. It's like, I mean, that alone should have been like, oh shit, we gotta vote for somebody who actually like acknowledges that this is a crisis. But I mean, that alone. But I mean, and let's not even. We could just talk about all this other shit. It just boggles my mind. It's crazy. So when the world ends, like it's like it's not gonna be like we didn't deserve it because it's like it's our fault because we fucking like made this stupid ass decision. But oh well, I didn't do it. I'm out here, doing activist work, and that's all you can do. That's all you can do. On that good note, I will see y'all later. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully next week. Peace out. Bye-bye.